Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Sunil Nafre, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you on another podcast that we're doing on behalf of Life Genius. And I have my very, very special guest, Mr. Satheesh Kumar, who is a yoga meditation teacher from Jakarta in Indonesia. It's always a pleasure to have you on this podcast, Satheesh. Hello there, welcome.
Welcome to you. Nice to meet you.
And nice to meet you again. Thank you very much. And in our last podcast, Satheesh very kindly did another marvelous demonstration of the Kalpanapati Pranayama breathing technique, controlled breathing technique. Very, very powerful. And we've had quite a lot of views from that, Satheesh. So that was quite popular. So what we're going to be doing in this particular podcast is carry on with our Neuro-Linguistic Programming series, where we take a deep dive into a technique that's used in NLP to help change communication, to transform behavior, and to be able to instigate change, important change in people or ourselves or other people. So we're going to be looking at some of the theoretical underpinnings of this particular technique, which is called the Meta Model. And then we're then going to go into some of the concepts and also some practical examples of how the model can actually be applied. Okay then. So the NLP Meta Model is a therapeutic technique that we can use to help understand other people's problems or help them to understand their own problems better. So literally, the meta model means to deconstruct what someone is saying so that you can then find out what the underlying cause is. And sometimes when we are in mid-flow in communication with someone, we don't always get the opportunity to really analyze or evaluate exactly what they're saying and how they've said it. Normally, from a conversation with someone, we sometimes feel the impact afterwards and not during. But if one is to be aware of the meta model, they're aware of the different aspects of this model, it may actually help them to understand the communication a lot better. Now, I'm not saying that when you understand the communication better, you change it automatically. It's something at least that you can then register with yourselves, and it's your choice and decision whether you want to make the changes or not. Okay? That's really, really important. Now, this universal model, this universal NLP meta model, it actually has three very important elements. And I'm going to go through each one of them now. Excuse me. The first one is called distortion. Okay? Now, distortion is the process of representing parts of the model differently than how they were originally represented. Okay? So this is when you actually process something. For example, you may well have been in a situation, a discussion or a conversation with someone where actually you felt that, is that what that person said? Has it been changed? Is there something there that I've missed out? Because you're in the process of processing the event. And then through processing, you may realize that there's been some distortion, that what is the reality is not how it was represented. Okay, now that's the first part of the model, distortion. The second one is generalization. Okay, the second one is generalization. Now this is the way in which a specific experience or a number of specific experiences is mapped to represent the complete category of which it is a member. Okay, so sometimes when we generalize, we tend to make an overall judgment about something rather than looking at the specifics of it. Okay, and so sometimes it's very easy in a conversation to generalize on someone else's behavior, almost making excuses for it, when really we should be pinpointing the problem or the issue. Okay, so the first one was distortion. Second one is generalization. The third one is deletion. Okay, so as the name suggests, where portions of the mental map are omitted and do not appear to be in the verbal expression. Okay, now it may well be that people may decide to omit or delete things because they may not be appropriate, they may not think it's relevant, or it may be very offensive, or maybe embarrassing, maybe fueled with shame. Okay, so people will tend to use in the communication distortion, generalization, and deletion. And we're not saying that all these things are negative. It's just that these things, these variables are in operation. And as long as we are aware of them in use, either we are using them or whether the other people are using them, it's something for us to be able to take into account in the future. Because obviously, if we are communicating with people and we want the best out the communication, we don't want important information to be deleted. We don't want things to be over-generalized. We don't want things to be distorted away from reality. Okay, so I'm just gonna go into some commentary now and maybe some examples of this model. It's often the case that when someone has a problem, they unconsciously already know what the solution is. Okay, now it's also often the case that they do not like the obvious solution. So they keep stirring the problem in the hope that a new, better solution will come up. This is very common in relationship problems. Okay, so could be family relationships between the mother and the child, father and the child, or between two brothers, or the mother and the father. So we tend to find that this is quite common. But the meta model of distortion, generalization, and deletion is designed to deconstruct the way someone has used their words to voice the problem and to try to get to the bottom of it. For example, one person might say, maybe a guy called Jim might say, "Hey bro, my girlfriend can be so annoying sometimes." And then the basic response would be, "Why? What's she doing?" Now, this response, perhaps incorrectly, assumes the girlfriend is doing something specific to annoy Jim. Okay, so if we get into the meta model, the response must make as few assumptions as possible. So if I reword this little conversation, so Jim says, "Bro, my girlfriend can be so annoying sometimes." But the meta response would be this: what exactly is happening when you find yourself feeling the most annoyed? Okay, so can you see the difference? Okay, the first response was not a meta response, a meta model response. It was just, why? What's she doing? But the meta model response is going into the more specifics. Okay, so what exactly is happening when you find yourself feeling the most annoyed? Okay, now at this point, I want to go into structures. Okay, we have something called a deep structure and something which is a surface structure, because deep structure and surface structures are both relevant when we're trying to dissect and deconstruct communication and particular conversations. Okay, so the reason we must make as few assumptions as possible is that communication is not a clear-cut procedure. It's definitely not clear-cut, especially when people may say, well, verbal communication only makes up about 30-40% of the overall communication, because then you've got maybe 60 to 70% of communication is non-verbal, using hands and using facial gestures. So when we communicate, it stems from various prompts, such as emotions and memories, which is deep structure. So emotions and memories are the deep structure. And that's sent through a web of cognitive processes before it comes to the speaker's mouth, which is the surface structure. So the deep structure is inside our minds, which produces the thoughts and feelings and emotions. But then it is the surface structure then verbalizes them. And sometimes the pathway between deep structure and surface structure can be quite interesting, because does the pathway between our mind and our voice, does it communicate clearly our emotions and feelings? I mean, is it not true that lots of people struggle with truly fully expressing themselves and their true emotional states? That they may be very angry and depressed and sad, but then verbally they may show something else. That they're going to distort things, they're going to generalize things, they're going to delete things because they don't want to upset people. So I think people are not realizing that they probably are, that they understand the difference between deep and surface. And one example for me, if I can share with you, is I think in my younger years, maybe even 10, 15 years ago, I had a problem trying to communicate my own thoughts and feelings and emotions clearly, so it represented how I was feeling, not misrepresenting, because I happen to be in a marriage, or I happen to be talking to my family, or I happen to be in the workplace. So for me, I've been able to align the two together. So whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm thinking, it just comes out. Okay, so I'm aware of the meta model, but I don't allow distortion, deletion, or generalization to get in the way of my communication. Now, sometimes we may find that if we speak the truth all the time, if we're trying to be real and authentic, don't expect everyone to be your friend. I mean, this is where etiquette, like, you know, being tactful and diplomatic and respectful, even though you don't like that person, or you don't agree with their values, or you're not happy with the situation or environment that you're in. But then phrases like putting on a different face and a different voice is needed sometimes when you want to hide things. Okay, now that was me 10, 15, 20 years ago. I was very good at doing that, but not anymore, because I've managed to make the alignment. Now, I'm not saying that everybody has to make the connection between deep and surface structure for them to be real and authentic. You can be real and authentic in any situation, even if it means that, you know, you are happy to distort little things slightly, or you're happy to, you know, delete things, because it's fine and you're happy with it. That's absolutely fine, okay? Because everyone's different. But all I'm saying is that I'm very aware of my deep structure, my surface structure. Where possible, I do align them together. So people around me, they're clear about who I am, what I represent, what my values are, what my truth is. And that way then, I'm clear. So I don't have to hide anything, and I'm not dumping things. I'm not dumping things that I'm not sorting out, or negative emotions. They all come out, okay? So it's very important to be able to be aware of the difference between deep structure and also the surface structure. Obviously, once I finish the podcast, it'd be very interesting to get my colleagues' thoughts on this, because then there may well be personal differences or cultural differences that may also have an impact on the relationship between deep structure and surface structure. And obviously, this is why my very good friend and colleague will be able to make his observations right at the end of the presentation. Okay, so therefore, it stands to reason that it's not easy to be 100% effectively communicate exactly what's in your mind, okay? Because if you do with your boss, you might get the sack. So many stories of people having to put up with rough, aggressive bosses who don't look after their staff, or they mistreat them, or they are overly overpowering over them, leaving people very, very depressed and very down. Their morale's very low, esteem's low anyway, feeling very angry, creating feelings of anxiety, stress, depression. These are the kind of things that I deal with as a life coach, that people come to me for help and advice. And invariably, sometimes it is to do with core relationships with their partner, with their husbands, with their wives, with their children, with their manager, with their bosses. And so this is where people need to be aware. So when I coach people, if I'm using a meta model, for them to be aware of the differences, and then it's up to them how they want to proceed forward, okay? Because it's their life, and obviously they're the ones who are going to have to live it in the situation, in the circles that they're currently in, okay? So basically what I'm going to do now is just go through some examples of some specific examples of distortions, first of all. Okay, so these are only examples of how to use your language to be able to, you know, recover lost sensory experiences from the speaker. So then you can then kind of be more clear in your communication. So the first thing about distortion is mind reading. Okay, so claiming to know someone's internal state. You know, for example, you might say, you don't like me. How do you know I don't like you? Okay. So that's a little conversation there where people are claiming to know someone's internal state. So you've probably heard of phrases like, you know, I can read your mind, I can read her mind, and things like that. But then again, they may well have some clues, but they don't really know what's going on in the person's mind unless the other person connects their deep structure with their surface structure. The second thing I want to talk about with regards to distortion is lost performative, okay? Lost performative. Now, value judgments where the person doing the judging is left out. For example, it's bad to be inconsistent. Who says it's bad? According to whom? How do you know it's bad? Okay, so this actually recovers source of the belief that the performative strategy for the belief is there. And so lost performative is the second one. The third one is complex equivalence. This is where two experiences are interpreted as being synonymous. For example, she's always shouting at me. She doesn't like me. How does her yelling mean that she doesn't like you? Have you ever shouted at someone you liked? So that's one example of the complex equivalence. Okay, now let's look at generalizations. Okay, there are a few points about these. The first one is there are things called the universal quantifiers. Now, universal generalizations such as all, every, never, everyone, no one, etc. For example, she never listens to me. Okay. Now, isn't that a common one? That probably might be, I don't know. It could be a husband saying that about his wife, or it could be a girlfriend saying that about her boyfriend. He never listens to me. Now, it may well be that this person does listen, but maybe they don't want to listen to that specific thing. Okay. This is how generalizations can be used, and they can cause some problems, because then if they continue, if somebody carries on with generalizing, say, you know, you never loved me, you know, you've never cared for me, even though they probably have, but they've overgeneralized it to basically, you know, express how they're feeling. How they're really feeling is they're feeling terrible about themselves, okay? And it's not the other person not being emotionally receiving, it's because they've got other things going on, okay? But a way of expressing their anger about something else is to say, you don't love me anymore, you don't care for me, okay? So sometimes that can come into play, okay? Also, we have something called modal operators, okay? Modal operators, and these come from the modal auxiliary verb, like should or must or have or need, okay? So these tend to express necessity, okay? So, for example, I have to take care of her. It's my responsibility. Or you might say, I can't, I can, I will, I won't, I may not. It may be possible, it's impossible. I can't tell him the truth. What would happen if you did? So these are examples of modal operators, and these can also come into play as well, okay? So we're now coming on to deletions now. So for example, the first one that comes to mind is nominalization. Now, process words which have been frozen in time, making them nouns. Okay, for example, there is no communication here. Okay, who's not communicating what to whom? How would you like to communicate? And this really talks about nominalization. The second one is you can use also unspecified verbs. For example, he rejected me. Then how? Specifically, how did he reject you? Okay, so that can also be used to delete information. And also you have simple deletions like I am uncomfortable, okay? Or they don't listen to me. That is also a deletion. And then the next one is comparative deletions. It is in, for example, good, better, best, worst, more, less, most, and least. Okay, so those are examples of how you can actually use the meta model. Okay, so generally it's about distortion, it's about generalization, and also deletion. We've talked about some specifics within each one with some precise examples, and also we've talked about the alignment between the deep structure, which is inside of us in our mind, our thoughts, feelings, and our emotions and our attitudes, and then how it's all expressed in terms of the surface structure. So our attitudes and behavior can then be represented within our speech. And it's about the alignment or misalignment of them, which is really important. And the NLP Meta Model can actually throw some light in that. Okay, then. So that completes the presentation there. Thank you so much indeed for that, for listening. So then, Satheesh, so any comments or observations on what I've presented about the meta model?
It's good, very nice, nicely expressed. You explained everything in a elaborative manner. It's good. Some ideas you told, that distortion and generalization and deletion are generally commonly most of them using while they are doing the conversation. Well, listen, what happened? You told that mind reading, it is one of the very important elements. Mind reading with body language. Mind reading may not be possible for all, but few people can read the mind. Yeah. Also, we can read the body language of the people.
Yeah.
So how they, when you say something, how they will react. According that, you can alter your questions and everything. For example, when you meet your high official, you look, his face is very angry. So you have to limit your words and control. Don't say anything now. You postpone the offer. That is also, you have to look the body language. Body language and mind reading. That also, that is a very important one.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a one scenario is that generally, if you are working in a companies, generally the managing director will come to the office at 10 o'clock.
Okay, I think Satheesh, I think you're freezing a little bit now.
Anayans and come into the room, so they are tired. Coming from the traffic, they feel tired. So let them take rest. After 30 minutes, when you start your conversation, that is also good.
Yeah, okay. I'm having
most of the time your superiors need you.
Yeah.
You must be more confident. Whatever you say, it should.
Yeah.
Suppose you should not So when you use it in front of your superiors and everything, because it shows your confidence.
Yes, that's
you are
true.
waiting for, you're going to take some initiative, and you are ready for accepting any new challenge.
Yeah,
So
that's a
this,
really good point. That's a really good point, because in terms of having confidence, you've really got to say what you feel, isn't it? You know, just to speak your mind, and you know, relay your vision. Otherwise, people, if you don't use your voice, people won't know what's in your mind.
also your voice will be not high pitch voice, but medium. The voice must be very powerful. The
Yeah,
words must be very
yeah,
powerful.
yeah.
So you have to answer his whatever he asked the question. You answer in a confident pace, and your voice should be confident. So
Yeah,
that will increase the that your character, and also attitude is very very important.
yeah,
Attitude and behavior is very very important.
yeah,
Sometimes in companies, if you work in a company or school or anywhere, your attitude is very very important. How you react to the superiors, and then how you approach them, how your behavior.
yeah,
For example, sometimes you may be very brilliant, awesome, uh, experienced salesman, but what happened? Your attitude is not good. You are getting overconfident. There is a difference between overconfident and confident.
yeah,
The
yeah,
slight thread is different.
yeah,
Some, if you are overconfident, that also nobody likes it. So your attitude is very important.
yeah, yeah.
Do it, I will do it.
Yes.
You should, or we will do it. Generally, that's why in many companies they need the word we instead of I. Use we.
Ah,
We
yes.
will do it.
Yeah,
We have done it.
yeah,
When you accomplish some target, you just say we have done it. We achieved it. But if there is any responsibility on the part of you, I will do it. You have to use the word I if there is a responsibility. When you achieve something, you must say we have done it
yeah,
instead of saying I. So
yeah.
these are the some effective communication tools to be used. And deletion, what happened nowadays? What happened? People while communicating with each other, they delete the important part.
Yes.
For example, if you say 10 words, 10 sentences to him, he will say only 5 sentences to another
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
That
Because,
second person will say 2 sentences to the third person. So
yeah,
they alter it according to their whims and fancies.
yeah.
It's
Because
also there.
I'm thinking, when I reflect back on my life and reflect back on my personal relationships or working relationships or whatever it might be, I think probably I was not aware I was using the meta model all the time. You know, I was deleting things, I was distorting things, I was generalizing on things. So people would not be upset, or I wouldn't offend people, or people wouldn't know the real me or what I represent or my values. So I would always be using the meta model in such a way as to just to conform, and to, you know, to just um, you know, just not to rock the boat, you know, just to keep things nice and smooth and stable and steady. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to be happy, okay? Because sometimes, when you suppress what you're feeling and what you really want and what you really want to say, if you suppress it all the time, it can actually cause you other issues, can cause you anxiety and stress and depression, because you just cannot be who you really want to be. You can't express, you can't tell your, your friend or your manager exactly how you feel about them, because you don't want to offend them, or because there's lots of history, there's like lots and lots of, you've spent so many years together, you know each other for a long time back, and that can complicate the connection between the deep structure and the surface structure. And if one's not careful, that could cause problems. So it's really important that every single relationship that anybody has, no matter how long it is, that people do need to be aware that you want to make sure you're aligning the deep structure with the surface structure, and then you are aware of these three elements within the universal meta model. because that's what helps us to create the language. You know, we talk about meta language, meta. So it's really about the language. And if we don't clearly say what we are feeling, and it's sometimes a skill, isn't it, Satheesh? You know, sometimes we can still convey the sentiment without offending people, and that's where we come into the realm of interpersonal skills. You know, we have interpersonal skills where you can be clear, you can be concise, but you can be respectful, and you can be mindful of the reaction of the other person, not to shock them. So it's all about how. It's about the how you connect what you're thinking about with your, you know, with your language. I mean, but you know, have you heard of phrases like some people shoot from the hip? People who shoot from the hip means they tell you exactly what they're feeling. So if they don't like you, they say, I hate you, or you are this, or you are blah, 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 you know? And those are people who have a clear connection between the deep structure and the surface structure, but it doesn't mean they're going to be popular or liked or respected if they are completely telling the truth. So one has to be mindful, but you know, there are kind of pros and cons, isn't there, really? Because you want to make sure that you can be yourself, you can be who you want to be yourself, but also you blend in nicely in your marriage, you blend in nicely with your children, with your family community, with your work colleagues, with your friends, etc. But so it's a bit of a balancing act that, you know, because some people, what happens, if they're not aware of these things, they tend to morph themselves in and they lose their identity. You know, they just morph themselves in. They just become the other person. They become their husband's life. They become their wife's life. They become they become what the company wants them to be, but then they lose their sense of self because they just want to not to upset anybody or rock the boat, and that's what they think they should be doing, when really they could potentially be losing some parts of their real true self. And what will happen is, if you're not careful, it'll come back to you as shadows, and it will come back to remind you this is who you really are, and you need to own it, and you need to speak your truth, rather than be morphed by other things, other dimensions and elements in life. And that's why it's so important to be able to make the right decisions, so you retain your own identity, but then you blend in everywhere else, but you don't lose your identity as a result of blending in, if that makes sense. Okay, so Satheesh, do you have any other observations or comments? Anything else you'd like to say before we close out the segment?
It's good. Everything fine. Okay.
That's great. Thank you so much for all your insights, and thank you everybody for watching. So we've done a podcast now on the NLP Meta Model and how it can be used effectively. So please do leave your comments in the comments box. Do get in touch with either myself or Satheesh if we can be of any help to you. My colleague Satheesh is a yoga meditation teacher, and he runs sessions for people. I'm a life coach, a transformational life coach, NLP practitioner, and clinical hypnotherapist. So I can offer a range of complementary alternative therapies to help people become their best versions of themselves, and to help them to deal with whatever's going on in their lives, be it in life, work, or business. So please do get in touch. All of the contact details are in the description box. Until next time, thank you, take care, and bye.